Many people have said that the best time for military to take over, to execute a coup in Nigeria was when Tinubu was out of the country for almost 17 days, first to UK and later to France. They said it was a working leave. Some said it was for medical checkup, whatever the reasons. He was out, and then at the same time, the vice president was also out. So in those period of about 2 weeks, the president and the vice president of Nigeria were not in Nigeria. And because they didn't follow due process, you would have had a situation whereby power would have been transmitted to the Senate president. You see, the Senate president, in trying to be nice to Tinubu, shot himself in the foot. Because if the Senate had done the right thing by insisting that Tinubu does the right thing by transmitting power to Shettima, Shettima would have also been forced to do the right thing by transmitting power to the third person in the succession plan, who happens to be the Senate president. So for those 2 weeks, we would have had the Senate president, Godswill Akpabio, being the acting president of Nigeria. At least if it's just to say, oh, he acted, he would have had that. But because the corruption of politics would not let these people see and do the right thing, he didn't get that opportunity. Maybe because he's thinking, okay, the opportunity will come in the future. But that is up to Nigerians to decide. But then again, let's come back to the question without digressing too far. Is it possible for any military coup to be executed in Nigeria to take out Tinubu? Is it possible? My express answer for that is a no. It is not possible. And it's because of one very important reason. It is ironic that the reason why a military coup against Tinubu is not possible in today's Nigeria, the reason that is not possible is the same reason that Nigeria is in the problem it is in. It's ironic. And we will expose that problem in this video. Now, to expose the problem, we need to ask ourselves some questions. Coups. How has coup been implemented in Nigeria since 1966? January 15 was the first coup. There was a counter coup in July. And after that, there was a coup in 1975. Yes, the coup that removed Yakubu Gowon. Okay, so let's even take the coup chronologically. The first coup was in 1966, and that coup removed Tafawa Balewa as the Prime Minister of Nigeria and ended the presidency of Nnamdi Azikiwe. That's the first coup. Then the second coup, it was in July, that removed the then military head of state, which was General Aguiyi Ironsi, right? So after Aguiyi Ironsi was removed, you had another coup that removed Yakubu Gowon. And after Yakubu Gowon was removed, it was the turn of Murtala Mohammed. And there was a coup that removed Murtala Mohammed. After that coup, who was the head of state now? It was the turn of Obasanjo. Obasanjo handed over to Shehu Shagari. And then there was a coup against Shehu Shagari by Muhammadu Buhari. Muhammadu Buhari barely used 2 years. There was a coup against him by Ibrahim Babangida. Ibrahim Babangida was forced to step aside in 1993. He put in place the interim national government of Ernest Shonekan. And then there was a palace coup by General Sani Abacha. And that was the last of the successful coups. There was a Gideon Oka coup of 1990. That was a failed coup. And a couple of others that were failed. Now, if you look at all of these coups, there is something that is common to all of them. And that thing that is common to all of them is the reason Nigeria is the way it is today. And that thing that is common to all of them is the reason no military coup can successfully take place against Tinubu as president of Nigeria today. No military coup. It is sad. And we need to understand this reason for one reason only: to save and fix Nigeria. I'm all about fixing Nigeria. And so I'm looking at everything that will help us fix Nigeria, to make it work for all Nigerians and not for a very select few that are working by the dictates of the elite group of persons in the US-led West, to make Nigeria such that Nigeria continues in this part of consumption and not in the part of production, to make it such that Nigeria continues to remain a raw material source for the factories and the economies of the global north and nothing more, not minding that the people of Nigeria and Nigerians are suffering. We want a Nigeria that works. So for us to get that Nigeria, and this is important, for those of you who are going to be watching this video even long after I'm gone, this is critical and it's important. If we understand the reason why no coup can take place against Tinubu, then we will understand why economies of the global north, the American economies, the European economies, the Chinese economy, the Russian economy, will understand why they work. We will understand why they work. Now, why? What is common with all of the coups that have taken place in Nigeria? All of them took place first, and this is very important. The second one is more important, but this is important. They took place first because of the influence of the Americans and the Europeans. All the coups took place because of the influence of the Americans and the Europeans. If we all know this, then we will understand why I say you begin to get an idea of why a coup against Tinubu right now is not possible. It was influenced by them. That's the first thing. The second thing you will discover is that they took place, all the coup, go and check it. They took place at a time when Nigeria was moving in the path of production. All of those coups took place at a time when Nigeria was moving in the path of production. And they were moving in that path with the help of the Soviet Union, or today's Russia. Every time Nigeria took a step to move in the path of production with the help of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which they called the USSR, or the Soviet Union, which is Russia today. Every time Nigeria took a decision and made a giant step in the direction of production with the help of Russia, there was a coup. And the coup was instigated and masterminded by this elite group of persons in the US-led West. It is common to all of them. Check it. During the time of Tafawa Balewa, many think that it's an ethnic thing in Nigeria. It is not. And that is why I don't support anybody who is still holding on to ethnic sentiments with regards to our Nigerian civil war. It was not an ethnic thing. They just saw ethnicity and tribalism and religion as a tool that they can use to manipulate us to fight ourselves, so that they can succeed in derailing us from the part of production that we were in to a part of consumption. They just wanted us to remain consumers. They didn't want us to become industrialized. And you had the likes of Tafawa Balewa moving us in that direction. So they destabilized everything and did the coup. The same thing happened because all this talk about refineries started with Tafawa Balewa. And then after the first refineries were built with help from the Russia, Soviet Union, right? They were planning the Warri refineries, planning refineries. In fact, they planned 9 refineries. 9! None of them saw the light of day because of the coup. And people do not realize that that coup took place because Nigeria was moving on the path of production. People don't realize it. So they hide behind ethnic sentiments. They are still caught in that ethnic chauvinism, the ethnic bitterness, inter-ethnicity rivalry. They're still stuck in it. They fail to realize that the real reason for that coup and the counter coup was to take Nigeria out of the path of production and put us on the path of consumption. That was what the Tafawa Balewa administration was doing. And when they successfully derailed it, they thought that they would be able to have their way with Yakubu Gowon. Yakubu Gowon intensified the plans of Tafawa Balewa. It intensified it. And so they were building the refineries, they were getting help from the Soviet Union in moving us further and further the road of production. And they didn't like it. So guess what? They used his friend, organized a coup to take him out, to put in somebody that they think would be more malleable to them. Unfortunately, it was a Murtala Mohammed that succeeded. He was not the one that was intended to head the new government. But because he was the most brutal and the most senior, somehow he found himself to be the head of the new government after the successful coup against a Yakubu Gowon. Now he came in, and very quickly the Americans realized that Murtala Mohammed was, according to the Yorubas, is not Aaron Riro. Is not an easy pushover. They threatened him. He threatened them back. In fact, he threatened them openly by publishing the threat letter that the American ambassador submitted or delivered to him from the US president then. He published the letter in the New York Times, and this infuriated the American president. 33 days later, he was assassinated. And guess who? By Dimka and his cohorts. And the reason for the assassination, they said, he was leaning towards the Soviet Union. That was the reason that Dimka gave, one of the reasons why they executed that coup against Murtala Mohammed. And that's because he continued on that path of production with help coming from the Soviet Union. So they took him out, brought in an Obasanjo. And Obasanjo, in my eye, I have a lot of respect for Obasanjo as a person. I love his style of leadership. I love his character, his charisma. But unfortunately, Obasanjo, in my opinion, is the worst president ever in the history of Nigeria. Many people will get carried away and say he brought GSM. Oh, he cancelled our debt. Anybody can bring GSM. Was it GSM we needed at the time? Was GSM useful? Of course it was useful. Was it GSM we needed at the time? Of course we needed GSM at the time. But were there things that could have been done better? Things like Ajaokuta Steel that could have put Nigeria on the path of production that Obasanjo could have done in his first and his second coming? Yes, there were. Did he do it? The answer is no. When Obasanjo took over in 1975, after the assassination of Murtala Mohammed, right? He gave Nigeria to America. Somehow he believed that it was Yakubu Gowon that masterminded the assassination of Murtala Mohammed, who was his boss because he was the second in command at the time. In fact, he was supposed to go to the Organization of African Unity Conference to give a speech about who Nigeria is supporting in the, is it Congolese or the Angolan war? One of the two. And because of the threat letter that the US president sent to Murtala at the time, Murtala had to cancel that trip last minute, stopped Obasanjo from going on that trip, and decided to go on that trip himself and made a speech that shook the world, shook the elite group of persons in the US-led West that control the IMF and the World Bank that want Nigeria to remain on the path of consumption. It shook them. And then they struck. He was assassinated. And then you had an Obasanjo who came into power. Now, Obasanjo came into power. the first thing he did was to begin to ask UK then to repatriate Yakubu Gowon to Nigeria to face trial. Because his suspicion was that Yakubu Gowon was responsible for the coup, not knowing that it was the same people he was serving, the IMF and the World Bank, and this elite group of people in the US-led West. He thought it was Gowon. And when the UK government refused to extradite Yakubu Gowon to him, he decided to cut ties with the UK government. In fact, instead of returning us back to our parliamentary system of government today, Obasanjo decided to go in bed fully with the Americans and chose to adopt the IMF and World Bank first system of government, which was the presidential system of government. In fact, not just any presidential system of government. He went and copied America's presidential system of government, hook, line, and sinker, and gave it to us as a system of government. In all the 3 years of Obasanjo's first coming, Ajaokuta still was stalled. So that part of moving us in the part of production was stalled in Obasanjo's first coming. It was stalled in Obasanjo's second coming. And when they thought that, okay, because the IMF and the World Bank, the Americans, the Europeans, they are the proponents, they are the preachers of democracy. Oh, let's have a democracy in place because they thought they could control democracies better. So they had a Shehu Shagari. And unfortunately, a Shehu Shagari continued very strongly in the part of production, pushing Nigeria in the part of production very, very strongly. I rate Shehu Shagari as the second best president in the history of Nigeria so far because a lot of the things that you're seeing in Nigeria today were done in his time. You had all the steel rolling mills in Katsina, in Jos, in Oshogbo, Nigerian machine tools, all of those things that were targeted at pushing Nigeria into the direction on the road to rapid industrialization. All of those things were done in the administration of Shehu Shagari. And the West didn't like that. They didn't like that. And what did they do? They came up with all this, and that's what they always do. They first of all come and say, oh, corruption. Oh, corruption. Oh, corruption. Oh, come on. They pushed corruption, and then they executed another coup that they thought would benefit them. And of course, in the short term, it would have benefited them if it was just a Buhari. But you had an Idiagmo then who was smart, right? And started implementing policies that meant a shift in that direction towards industrialization, towards production. But it was a very slow one. Even that slow one, the West didn't like it. Because immediately Buhari came, everything about Ajaokuta State, imagine that by 1983, Ajaokuta was 98% complete. Everything about Ajaokuta Steel, Delta Steel, everything was stopped. And that was the death of a lot of the car manufacturing and assembly plants that we had in Nigeria. By today, if Ajaokuta Steel was working, if Delta Steel was working, Katsina Steel Rolling Mill, Nigerian Machine Tool, Defense Industry Company of Nigeria, if all those things were working, Oshogbo Steel Rolling Mill, the Jos Steel Rolling Mill, if they were working, all the pipes that were imported to build Dangote refinery from Argentina, from China, from America, all those pipes would have been produced there. And you know what? That would have been millions of jobs, at least 10 million jobs. All the high unemployment rates that we're having now, we won't have it. The low quality jobs, because when they talk of giving people jobs now, creating job opportunities, it is low quality jobs. Bricklayer, handyman, low quality jobs. The high quality jobs are in the industrialized sector, and they don't want us to be industrialized, so they killed it. When they saw that the progress was slow with Buhari, they now instituted another coup. And that was the coup that brought in Babangida. Many people don't notice. If you go back to the speech that Babangida gave when he assumed office, you will see there that the first thing he talked, he said, in our consultation and in our discussions with the IMF and World Bank. At what time were you in discussion with IMF and World Bank when you were not the head of government? That's to tell you the influence, the infiltration that the IMF and the World Bank were having on our military top brass. And so they thought that they could bring in somebody who would be more malleable to their to what they want. And they did. They brought in the Babangida and he implemented their structural adjustment program, which they used to finally destroy our production capacity. It was meant to improve it on the surface, but it was riddled with corruption. And at this point, I must state, many of us do not realize that corruption was created by the IMF and World Bank. Corruption in Nigeria today was created by the IMF and World Bank. If the IMF and World Bank did not create corruption and now create enabling environment for corruption, corruption cannot thrive. Today, we talk about illicit financial inflows into Nigeria. The EFCC was forced on us. Under Obasanjo, it was forced on us because they wanted debt cancellation. And then the forced privatization. Many people don't know the sacrifice that Obasanjo sacrificed Nigeria to get debt cancellation. They don't know. The EFCC that was forced on us at that time was forced on us to stop corruption on the surface, but on the bottom, if you look at it, it was forced on us to promote a one-directional corruption. So the EFCC is quick to stop Yahoo boys who duped Western economies from bringing their dollars into Nigeria. They are quick to do that. But the EFCC cannot stop our corrupt politicians from looting our resources and sending those monies to America, to Europe, to UK, to China, to Russia. It cannot stop them. Do you see now that the EFCC is a tool in the hands of the IMF and World Bank? Let's come back. When they saw that, Babangida was no longer serving their tune. Yes, they destroyed already our production capacities. They destroyed it already under Babangida. They now decided, election, go to election. They went to election. One of their stooges again, which was MKO Abiola, was supposed to become president. Nigerians voted for him. But the antecedent of MK Abiola, he began to do things that became clear to this same elite group of persons that, if we allow this person, because he knows us so well, he'll be able to implement policies that would take Nigeria out of this part of consumption and put it in the part of production. They used Babangida to stop it. MKO Abiola was no saint. He had his record was so bad that Fela sang several songs to abuse him. International Tif, International Telephony, and Telegraph and Telephony, which was a company owned by Abiola then, was used to siphon a lot of money, and Fela converted it to International Tif, sang a lot of things, so many things, so many atrocities that the MKO Abiola was involved in. But at the end, he was in a place to take Nigeria out of consumption into production, because it takes a thief to catch a thief. And they saw that this thief knows us so well, he would do things that would benefit his country and take his country out of the part of consumption that Babangida has put it, and put it on a part of production. They decided to stop Abiola from being president. And they gave us Shonekon. And Shonekon began to do things because he was trained a tax expert in UK. He started to do things, increase the price of petrol, do things that will benefit the IMF and the World Bank. And Abacha came and took him out. And To some extent, Abacha was now doing some policies that meant to take Nigeria and restore Nigeria back on the path of production. But it was slow. And before you knew it, he died. And we are where we are today. So you'll find out that every coup that has successfully taken place, the Gideon Oka coup was not backed by the IMF and World Bank. It was just some Nigerians that thought that they could do one or two things. And that was why it failed. Every coup that has succeeded in Nigeria is a coup that has been backed by the IMF and World Bank and the CIA. And it is because they see or they feel threatened that Nigeria is moving in a path of production, in a path towards rapid industrialization with the help of the Soviet Union or with the help of Russia. And they don't want that. They want Nigeria to continue to remain on the path of consumption. So they intervene. And unfortunately, they know how to use religion to divide us. They know how to use ethnicity to divide us. And when they do such divisions, we now begin to think we are fighting amongst ourselves. The Fulani is not the enemy of the Igbos. The Yoruba is not the enemy of the Igbos. The Fulani is not the enemy of the Yorubas. The Igbo is not the enemy of the Yorubas. But they have succeeded in making us think it is, so that we can continue to fight ourselves. And in the process of fighting ourselves, we become more consumers because we don't produce our own guns. We don't produce our own weapons. So the weapons that will be used for us fighting each other, we still have to come and buy it from them. And in the process of us fighting each other, they will hide behind it, come in here and be looting our resources. That is why it is important, it is expedient that we move past this. All these recent talk and attacks against Yakubu Gowon at his 90th birthday, it is not necessary. The bitterness of the civil war, we must open our heart and pour it away. We must not allow any bitterness in our hearts. If Nigeria is to progress, we cannot allow any bitterness in our hearts. Because the people that are responsible for the problems of Nigeria, they are the IMF and the World Bank and the CIA. And they are all doing that so that we continue to be consumers only and not producers. This is why a coup cannot happen now. Because the CIA, the IMF, the World Bank, they are in support of Tinubu. And they will continue to be in support of Tinubu because Tinubu is doing their bidding and doing it very, very well. The three things they have always wanted. Devaluation of the Naira. Even a Buhari refused to give them that. A Buhari refused to give them that. He has given it to them. Devaluation of the Naira. Increase in prices of products and services in the name of removal of subsidy. Before, it was removal of subsidy in only petrol, oil and gas sector that they were asking Buhari to even remove. Buhari refused. Now, Tinubu has taken it like 1,000 notch higher. Instead of only increase in prices of products and services in the oil and gas sector, he has spread it to education, he has spread it to power, to electricity, he has spread it to health, he has spread it everywhere. He has given them the second thing they wanted, increase in price in the name of removal of subsidy. It's not only subsidy for fuel that Tinubu is removing, I hope you know. Subsidy for business is removing it by introducing more tax. Subsidy for education is removing it by introducing higher school fees. And then it fakely or deceptively tries to implement the student loan out of only about how many 200,000 that have applied. Only about 100,000 have been approved. Only about 20,000 have been paid. Out of over millions of students that we have. So what are the rest supposed to do? Where are they supposed to get the money to pay for the exorbitant school fees? In Lagos now it's from 28,000 to 200,000 plus. The same thing in federal government schools. So increase in price of services in educational sector by removal of education subsidy. Increase in power, electricity tariff, band A, band B. They say something is band A. You are supposed to have 20 hours plus of electricity supply. They increase the thing exorbitantly. Yet, 20 hours we don't see in Nigeria. Everything the IMF and World Bank wanted in terms of increase in prices by removal of subsidies, not just in oil and gas sector, Tinubu has given to the IMF and World Bank and CIA. And then the last one is privatization. He's doing it indirectly, opening up the space for corporations to be privatized. They are telling you now that our refineries cannot work. They are moribund. A refinery that is not up to 60 years old. We have refineries that are even refineries that refine heavy crude. In America, 60 to 70% of the refineries in America, out of the 142 refineries in America, 60 to 70% of them refined heavy crude, which was a crude that was in vogue in the early 1900s and co. Now, the crude that is in vogue now is light crude or burning crude, light crude. So the refining process is different. Our Kaduna refinery is supposed to refine heavy crude. But the Warri and the Port Harcourt refinery are supposed to refine light crude. So that's why there is swap of crude, our light crude, to countries that have heavy crude, like Iraq, like Venezuela, for Kaduna refineries. So you see that of the 142, 60% of them are what? Heavy crude. Now, these refineries are over almost 200 years old, and they are still functioning at full capacity. But yet you have people in Nigeria here telling us that our refineries that are just 60 years old, they are moribund. They are moribund. Why? They are preparing the ground to sell off those things. Already NNPC is coming out to say we are looking for people, private sector companies that will help us run it. They want to concession it. From concessioning, you will find that it will now become a conduit for siphoning public funds into private pockets. And of course, the IMF and the World Bank and CIA will benefit. They'll be happy because it gives them the control that they want against Nigerians. The three things that the IMF and World Bank have always wanted: privatization, removal of subsidy, increased prices of goods and services, not just in oil and gas, but in every other sector. Tinubu has given them. Then, devaluation of the naira. Dollar is 1.7 now to 1,700 to $1. What IMF and World Bank wants. So with this, Tinubu has the full support of the IMF and the World Bank and the CIA. And so long as he has their support, he has the support of UK, he has the support of France. So long as he has their support, there is no coup that can take place in Nigeria. So Nigerians, you better know now. Those of you who are calling for military to come and take over, it cannot happen because of the IMF and the World Bank and the CIA. And they continue to make sure that they impose and force upon us leaders that will make sure that Nigeria remains in the path of consumption and not production. This is why they don't like people like Peter Obi. But are we going to continue to allow it? We have a two-pronged solution. On the one hand, we must free Nigerians from the trap of poverty that they are caught in as a result of IMF-induced policies of Tinubu. We must free them from it. And one tool we can use is a food and social welfare program, which we hope will become a law if we can get the second plan to work, which is opening up the political terrain, starting a new political party with ideologies that will remove all the bottleneck, that will open the gate to all well-meaning Nigerians, people of integrity, patriotic citizens, to be in positions of power. And that is the Abundance Party of Nigeria. Things like exorbitant nomination fee will be removed. It will be absolutely free to get nomination forms to become a public office holder on this our new platform. You can't just jump and say you want to become a leader. You must have been a member for at least 12 months. You must undergo our orientation program with our orientation certificate. Our mode of primaries will be direct primaries, and it will be online, so it is not prone to rigging. No delegates, because the delegate system is the starting point for corruption, where corrupt politicians, the money bags, will now begin to buy their way into the tickets of the parties and then into office. Nothing like that. And then we must now begin to implement policies like Nigeria first, buying Nigeria first. So if we had that kind of policies, we will not be buying Toyota or buying Escalade or buying Range Rover when we have Innocent, when we have Ford, Nord. So these are the things that we can do to open up the political space by starting the Abundance Party of Nigeria. You need to join us if you are interested in the new Nigeria. You can't get your constitution if we don't change the leaders. You can't get your secession or division, IPOB, Biafra, Oduduwa, Arewa. You can't get it if we don't change these leaders. We can't get constitution force major if we don't change these leaders. We can't get a new constitution if we don't change these leaders. We can't get the correct electoral reforms if we don't change these leaders. We can't get true federalism if we don't change these leaders. We can't successfully fight corruption if we don't change these leaders. If we can't move in the path of industrialization if we don't change these leaders. We can't solve insecurity if we don't change these leaders. The problems in Nigeria, whatever the solution you think you have to it, they all depend on we changing these leaders. And like I said, because these leaders are imposed on us because of their comma and questionable character, they are forced to dance to the tune of the IMF and World Bank. And so long as they have the backings of the IMF and World Bank, there's only one thing we can do to remove them, and that is to shine light on their activities. And that is to this two-pronged approach. First of all, break their influence and free Nigerians from the poverty trap that they have set and Nigerians have been caught in, right? Set Nigerians free from that using the food and social welfare program. And then we set Nigerians free from the grip of these state captors, these corrupt politicians that have captured the Nigerian state. Set Nigerians free from them using a new political parties that open up the political space. This is the only peaceful way to do it. We can't use it. We can't remove them by violence because it's also counterproductive. If we go violent, the guns we will buy will still come from them to still continue to ship our jobs out, continue to create more unemployment and more poverty. So the violence is not a way out. It's a way to more of the same problems. The only solutions we have is this two-pronged approach. And it requires you to do something. You can't just sit by and do nothing. You can't sit idly by. You cannot continue to be expert problem analyst. Continue this expert problem analysis syndrome that Nigeria is. Everybody knows the problem. We're analyzing it. At the end of the day, we leave it to the same corrupt politicians to be the ones to implement the solutions, which is not in their interest. So it is we that have to do it. You have a job to do. Join us in creating this abundance party of Nigeria so that there can be abundance in Nigeria, abundance of food, abundance of jobs. We can do it in this country. Let us do it. I beg you. Click the link in the description. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask us. There's an email you can send us to. And of course, we need your support financially. Do something. Let us take back this country together.